Good day, everyone, everywhere, and special greetings to all those seated in heavenly places in Jesus, Yeshua, our Messiah. The name of this broadcast is Cross the Border, and I'm Nicholas. This is our Prophecy Reality day. We have Prophecy Reality Edition. We have the studio cam on, so we're going to talk about things in prophecy, current events, whatever anyone wants to do in the chat room. We're kind of open today. I spent the last couple weeks talking about the millennium, and so we're going to pick up a little bit on that. Got some comments and things, so we're going to talk about to iron out some issues there and concerns and things that people have emailed me about. And I want to talk a little bit about, methods of interpretation a little bit today, too. So we're going to get into all of that. You can join us in the chat room at firstamendmentradio.com. And at the top somewhere you'll find a button that says chat. It'll say C-H-A-T. Press the button. You can join us in the chat room. Take part of that. I have the chat window in front of me. And if you'd like to watch live, there's a link in the chat room right now. So before it scrolls off the screen, if you want to look at my face and any exhibits that I perhaps may put onto the screen. But if you just want to listen, that's fine too. And most people will hear this on a podcast or a replay. So understand that it's only live at in the AM hours or noon Eastern time on Wednesday mornings. Okay, so other than that, it's a rebroadcast. But to take part even in the rebroadcast, like I said, you can email me, go to my site, comment on the pages there and stuff, and comment on the show, and we'll include your comments or whatever if they're appropriate in the next broadcast, or if you have any questions or comments or anything like that. So welcome everybody who's in the chat room already, and anybody who shows up. Where did I want to begin today? Really, I've been very busy, so I didn't really have a whole lot of time, but I've been looking at things over weeks. And I've been reading this book here, Romanism and the Reformation. I'm about, almost through it, and I'm still very impressed with the book. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised at the book because I had several other works, The Approaching End of the Age and Light for the Last Days, also by the same author, but I wasn't as impressed with those works. And I've been kind of reviewing them a little bit, and I see why I wasn't impressed, because he does a lot of speculation in those works. But in the Romanism and the Reformation is a jewel, okay? This is a must-have for anybody's library that's into Bible prophecy and history. And because prophecy and history are all mixed up, let me tell you, because the Bible, everything that's happened in history from the time of Daniel forward was foretold in prophecy. So we got to watch it unfold in history. And that's what the Bible demonstrates. If you want to know what method of interpretation you should choose to interpret the prophecies in the Bible, is the historical method of interpretation. And that is you watch prophecy unfold in history, and when it fits, it fits. It fits very well. And also prophecy fulfilled is God's fingerprint on the Bible to verify that it is His work, because He sees everything from the beginning and the end to the end, and we shouldn't be surprised that if He can write about it in His in the book. You know, the book I have in this thing here. This is my Bible, my hard copy that I carry around. It's all there in the book, so we should be able to see things unfolding in prophecy. There are other methods of interpretation, like the futurists say they employ the strict literal interpretation, but I found that to be true, except when it doesn't uphold their outcome. Yeah, maybe that was a slip of the tongue there, that when I said it doesn't uphold their income. Yeah, maybe there's something to that too. because they write a lot of books and they make a lot of money on the futurists left behind, and all of that stuff has made some people just millionaires by pushing the futurist interpretation. But so they call themselves strict literal. So if they read something in the Bible, they try to interpret it and apply it as if they look around and say, where can I apply it right now? And they don't apply it to historically at all. Also, like I said, they throw out the strict literal when it comes to things like Daniel's 70th week and putting a gap in there. There literally is no gap in there. And even Chuck Missler agreed that upon the plain reading of the text, you would think that the 70 weeks are contiguous, he says, and I would agree with that statement. Upon the plain reading of the text, you would think. So the strict literal interpretation is that Daniel's 70 weeks are contiguous. There is no gap, okay? And you can't find one in the Bible anywhere. So I had a few things here, and so I highlighted them, so we should be able to get to them easy. Actually, even better than that, if you go to my website at crosstheborder.org, I did write an article here lately, and I'm going to put that on the screen too, so if you're tired of looking at my face, you can see that. Let's see. Press the right button. Oops, that was the wrong button. Producer, you're messing up. Okay, we press the right button now, and there we go. And I have the article. Go to my website, crosstheborder.org, and it's the last, I think it's the last posting there. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. It's the very top one. And it says the early church fathers were historicists, and it's an excerpt. Well, it's several excerpts from the book, Romanism and the Reformation by H. Grattan Guinness, and I have a picture of him as a young man, apparently, in the article there. And, you know, I continually hear, and you might want to use this to against your futurist friends out there who are always proclaiming, here's what they say, that the early church fathers were all futurists with only vague references. And that's what I mean. They only use vague references to the futurism of the early church fathers. But there is nothing vague in what H. Grattan Guinness reveals here. As a matter of fact, researching into it, I find that none of the early church fathers were futurists. None of them put a gap in Daniel's 70th week and put it off into the future. As a matter of fact, all the ones they quote, and there's only two that they really quote about Daniel's 70th week being future, they have the mistaken idea that Christ was going to return after 490 years, contemporary with them. So they thought that the 483 years unto Messiah the Prince, they were mistakenly thinking that was to the return of Christ. Okay, so you see the confusion there, and how even in the first century, many of the early church fathers got it dead wrong. And of course, we know that the 483 years was to the first coming of Christ, the Messiah, contemporary with the Gospels. Okay, so we know that was totally mistaken. And so when they use those quotes from those early church fathers who mistakenly believed that it was 483 years unto the second coming of Christ, taking a prophecy and totally putting it out of context, they were simply mistaken, and it doesn't uphold their what they're saying at all. So I have a great article on my website, and I might as well go through some of that. Let me open the article up here completely. For those of you just want to listen, I continually hear that the early church fathers were all futurists with only vague references. There's nothing vague in what H. Grattan Guinness reveals here. 1. The church fathers interpreted the four wild beasts of prophecy as representing four empires, and rightly so: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Here we have the foundation of the historical interpretation of prophecy. Take an instance Take as an instance the words of Hippolytus on the great image of the 4 wild beasts of Daniel. The golden head of the image, he says, is identical with the lioness by which the Babylonians were represented. The shoulders and arms of silver are the same with the bear, by which the Persians and Medes are meant. The belly and thighs of brass are the leopard, and we're talking about, of course, Daniel chapter 2 here. The belly and thighs of brass are the leopard by which the Greeks, who ruled from Alexander onward, are intended. The legs of iron are the dreadful and terrible beast by which the Romans, who hold the empire now, are meant. The 10 toes of clay and iron are the 10 horns which are to be. And of course, from Hippolytus' time, he was absolutely right in his interpretation using the historicist method, saying that he said what was to be, was saying he wasn't speculating about it, but he was saying we haven't seen this portion yet. So he's interpreting properly there, historically. He continues, the one other little horn springing up in their midst is the Antichrist, the stone that smites the image and breaks it in pieces, and that filled the whole earth is Christ, who comes from heaven and brings judgment on the world. This statement is remarkable for its clearness, correctness, condensation, and expresses the view held still by the historic school today. And H. Gratan Guinness writes that, and I agree with that statement completely. So we have a 1st century early church father absolutely stating the same interpretation as we interpret today, except what we have already seen come to pass, he says, is to be in the future. Hippolytus says in the treatise on Christ and Antichrist, rejoice, blessed Daniel, thou hast not been in error. All these things have come to pass. Already the iron rules. Already it subdues and breaks in pieces. Already it brings all the unwilling into subjection. Already we see these things ourselves. Now we glorify God, being instructed by thee. Number 2. The fathers held that the 10 horned beasts of Daniel and John are the same. As an instance, Irenaeus, in his book Against Heresies, says, John in the Apocalypse teaches us the 10 horns shall be which were seen by Daniel. Number 3, the fathers held the historic interpretation of the Apocalypse. As Eliot says, none of the fathers entertained the idea of the apocalyptic prophecy overleaping the chronological interval. Were it less or greater, antecedent to the consummation and plunging at once into the times of the consummation. Here, for example, commentary of Victorinus on the Apocalypse of John, writing toward the end of the 3rd century. This is the earliest commentary extant on the Apocalypse as a whole. In this, the going forth of the white horse under the first seal is interpreted of the victories of the gospel in the 1st century. This view, you will observe, involves the historical interpretation of the entire book of Revelation. Victorinus interprets the woman clothed with the sun, having the moon under her feet, and wearing a crown of 12 stars on her head, and traveling in her pains as the ancient church of the fathers, prophets, saints, and apostles. In other words, the Judeo-Christian body of saints. He could not, of course, point to the fulfillments which were at his early date still future, but he recognizes the principle. Number 4, the fathers held that the little horn of Daniel, the man of sin, foretold by Paul, and the revived head of the Roman Empire predicted by John, represent one and the same power. And they held that power to be the Antichrist. For example, Origen, in his famous book Against Celsus, thus expresses himself, After quoting nearly the whole of Paul's prophecy about the man of sin in 2 Thessalonians, which he interprets of the Antichrist, he says, "Since Celsus rejects the statement concerning Antichrist, as it is termed, having neither read what is said of him in the book of Daniel, nor in the writings of Paul, nor what the Savior in his Gospels has predicted about his coming, we must make a few remarks on this subject. Paul speaks of him who is called Antichrist, describing, though with certain reserve, both the manner and time and cause of his coming. The prophecy also regarding Antichrist is stated in the book of Daniel, and is fitted to make an intelligent and candid reader admire the words as truly divine and prophetic, for in them are mentioned the things relating to the coming kingdom, beginning with the times of Daniel and continuing to the destruction of the world." Jerome, in his commentary in the book of Daniel, says, with reference to the little horn, which has a mouth speaking great things, that it is the man of sin, the son of perdition, who dares to sit in the temple of God, making himself as God. 5. The Fathers held that the Roman Empire was the let, or hindrance, referred to by Paul in 2 Thessalonians, which kept back the manifestation of the man of sin. This point is of great importance. Paul distinctly tells us that he knew, and that the Thessalonians knew, what that hindrance was, and that it was then in existence. The early church, through the writings of the Fathers, tells us what it knew upon the subject, and with remarkable unanimity affirms that this let, or hindrance, was the Roman Empire as governed by the Caesars. That while the Caesars held imperial power, it was impossible for the predicted Antichrist to arise, and that on the fall of the Caesars he would arise. We have a point on which Paul affirms the existence of knowledge in the Christian church. The early church knew, he says, what this hindrance was. The early church tells us what it did know upon the subject, and no one in these days can be in a position to contradict its testimony as to what Paul had by word of mouth only told the Thessalonians. It is a point on which the ancient tradition alone can have authority. Modern speculation is positively impertinent on such a subject. What then was the view of the early church? Look at the words of Tertullian, quoting Thessalonians. He says, "Know ye now," he says, "now you know what detaineth that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now hinders must hinder until he be taken out of the way. What obstacle is there but the Roman state, the falling away of which, by being scattered into 10 kingdoms, shall introduce Antichrist? That beast, Antichrist, with his false prophet, may wage war on the church of God." Read the words of Chrysostom in his commentary on 2 Thessalonians. One may first naturally inquire, what is that which withholdeth? And after that, would know why Paul expresses this so obscurely. He who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. That is, when the Roman Empire is taken out of the way, then he shall come. And naturally, for as long as the fear of this empire lasts, no one will readily exalt himself. But when that is dissolved, he will attack anarchy. He will attack the anarchy and endeavor to seize upon the government, both of men and of God. For as the kingdom before this were destroyed, that the Medes and the Babylonians, that of the Babylonians by the Persians, that of the Persians by the Macedonians, that of the Macedonians by the Romans, so will this be by Antichrist, and he by Christ. Oh, just beautifully laid out. Then, Accounting for Paul's reserve in alluding to this point, he adds, because he says of the Roman Empire, he naturally only glanced at it and spoke covertly. For if he had said that after a little while the Roman Empire would be dissolved, they would now immediately have overwhelmed him as a pestilent person, and all the faithful as living and warring to this end. They would have gone after him as an instigator of treason. You know how the Roman Empire was. If he had spoke those words without veiling them somewhat. From Irenaeus, who lived close to apostolic times, down to Chrysostom and Jerome, the fathers taught that the power withholding the manifestation of the man of sin was the Roman Empire as governed by the Caesars. The fathers therefore belong to the historic and not the futurist school of interpretation. For futurists imagine that the hindrance to the manifestation of the sin is still in existence, though the Caesars have long since passed away. 6. The fathers held that the fall of the Roman Empire was imminent, and therefore the manifestation of Antichrist close at hand. Justin Martyr, for example, one of the earliest of the fathers, in his dialogue with Trypho, says, "He whom Daniel foretells would have dominion for time and times and a half is already even at the door, about to speak blasphemous and daring things against the Most High." Cyprian, in his exhortation to martyrdom, says, "Since the hateful time of Antichrist is already beginning to draw near, I would collect from the sacred scriptures some exhortations of preparing and strengthening the minds of the brethren, whereby I might animate the soldiers of Christ for the heavenly and spiritual contest." And so it seems so many of these words are so applicable even today with the coming reintroduction of Antichrist and his mark of the beast system. We should have the same mindset as these fathers were preparing for the first revealing of Antichrist at the fall of the Caesars. Continuing here, number 7, the fathers held that the man of sin, or Antichrist, would be a ruler or head of the Roman Empire. A striking illustration is this of the interpretation by Irenaeus and Hippolytus of the mysterious number 666, the number of the revived head of the beast, or Antichrist. Irenaeus gives as its interpretation the word Latinos. He says Latinos is the number 666 as a very possible and a very probable solution, this being the name of the last kingdom, for Latins are they who at present bear rule. We'll be back after these messages. You're listening to Cross the Border. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Welcome back. Just a hello to Michael and Richard and Charles and Stepaway and Brett Wade, everyone in the chat room there. Thank you for showing up. And if you want to join them in the chat room, if you're live on Wednesday morning or noon Eastern time, then you can join us in the chat room there. You're listening to Prophecy Reality, the Prophecy Reality edition of our Cross the Border. We go through the Bible 4 days a week, and we take this day in the middle of the week to talk about, well, current events, topical things, and answer emails and that sort of thing. This segment, their first segment, and this one, I'm talking about the historical method of interpretation. And specifically, if you're interested, you want to catch up on that, you can go to my website, crosstheborder.org, and you'll see you'll see an article there at the top right now. Of course, it'll move down as the days go by, but early church fathers were historicists, and I'm going through that right now, the early church fathers, because I continually have heard over and over from the futurists that all of the early church fathers were futurists in their interpretation, but I found that that is absolutely not true. It cannot be proven anywhere, and I would challenge anyone to prove it. But so as close as they get to being futurists is the mistaken idea, and these are the ones they quote, where they mistakenly believe that the 70 weeks of Daniel started at the gospel times, and they were looking forward to Christ returning in the 70-week period rather than coming the first time, where we know the 70 weeks is supposed to be placed. So you can see that people can be in error in any era, even the early church era, but none of them were futurists with using the futurist interpretation that is held today. I'll continue here. Was on number 7. You can see this article, like I said, at my blog, crosstheborder.org. Number 7, the fathers held that the man of sin, or Antichrist, would be a ruler. I'll redo this part. Would be a ruler or head of the Roman Empire. A striking illustration of this is the interpretation by Irenaeus, get those names right, Irenaeus and Hippolytus, of the mysterious number 666, the numbering of the revived head of the beast, or Antichrist. Irenaeus gives as its interpretation the word Latinos. He says Latinos is the number 666, and is very probable solution, this being the name of the last kingdom, for Latins are they who at present bear rule. So understanding that the Antichrist would be a head of the Roman Empire, and as we know historically speaking, that it is a succession head, that it is a succession of heads of the Roman Empire, because it is the number of a man, and more succinctly, it is the number of a man who holds a position, who sits in the seat of the Antichrist there at the Vatican. Hippolytus gives the same solution in his treatise on Christ and Antichrist. Number 8, the fathers held that the Babylonian of the Apocalypse means Rome. On this point, they were all agreed, and their unanimity is an important seal on the correctness of this interpretation. Tertullian, for example, in his answer to the Jews, says Babylonian in our own John is a figure of the city Rome as being equally great and proud of her sway and triumphant over the saints. Victorinus, who wrote the earliest commentary on the Apocalypse extant, says on Revelation 17, the 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sitteth, that is, the city of Rome. Hippolytus says, tell me, blessed John, apostle and disciple of the Lord, what didst thou see and hear concerning Babylon? What didst thou see and hear concerning Babylon? Arise and speak, for it sent thee also into banishment. Here, you notice here the view that Rome, which banished the Apostle John, is the Babylon of the Apocalypse. Whoops. Okay. I hit my scroll button again, and I don't know why it's doing that. Full screen. Nope. Yes, this is a specific window. Is that it? No. Specific area. There, I have it back. Gotta watch that scroll thing. I went to scroll the text here, and it scrolled something else. Okay, let me see. Augustine says, Rome, the second Babylon, quoting him, and the daughter of the first, to which it pleased God to subject the whole world and bring it all under one sovereignty, was now founded. In chapter 28, he calls Rome the Western Babylon. In another chapter, he says, it has not been in vain that this city has received the mysterious name of Babylon, for Babylon is interpreted confusion, as we have said elsewhere. So even Augustine, one of the early church fathers, equates Babylon and Rome, and it's very popular today. It's very popular today in America for people to call America Babylon, and I have a book called The End of America. The proposition is that America is the daughter of Babylon, and I reviewed that book, and if you search my blog, I think even if you put in your Google search engine, maybe I'm going to try that right now and see if that actually works. See, book review. Yeah. Don't do this until I tell you that it works. End of America, yeah. End of America. I want to see. Book review, End of America, and see if it comes up here. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. So if you put in book review, End of America, you'll see, like number 6 down is my review of the book. So if you want to know how faulty this book is in its interpretation of America being, what do you call it? The end time Babylon, or the daughter of Babylon. You can see the book review I did on that proposition there. So a lot of people. And I agree with the early church fathers. Rome is still Babylon, and if you get my book, yeah, might as well here. Footsteps of Mystery Babylon. You can read all about it, and I think, if you're honest and you'll check out all the scriptures, you do your own research, I think you'll come into an agreement with me and the early church fathers and the historicist method that yes, Rome is still Babylon today, only it is in the broken iron. See, because if you go back to Daniel chapter 2, the image of Daniel chapter 2, and you see the image goes all the way from the head of Babylon to the 10 toes of iron and clay. Okay? And of course we know that the iron represents Rome. That's clearly understood. But we see there's nothing else. There's no other interposing, worldwide ruling power between the iron and the time when Christ comes. So that would make the image and the interpretation, which is sure, of the Daniel 2 dream, that would make it unsure, wouldn't it? So you can't squeeze anything else in there. The historicist method, which is demonstrated and illustrated in Daniel chapter 2, does not allow America to be Babylon. It only allows the Roman Empire to be the end-time Babylon in a broken form, and which has been in a broken form since the vicars of Christ of the Vatican and the Caesars ceased in what year was it that the Caesars took over? So that it has been the Roman Empire since then, and it will be to the end. There is no interposing government system in there anywhere in that image. So if America were the end time Babylon, that would mean that the dream is not sure, and neither is the interpretation of Daniel chapter 2. You'd have to throw all that out. And that's why, I cover that in the first chapter of my book. As a matter of fact, what is the first chapter of my book called? It's called, and I'll put that up, it's called A Template for Prophecy. The Dream is Certain and the Interpretation is Sure. That's the first chapter of my book. Here you can see it right there. See? That's it. Going back to there's an illustration there of the Daniel chapter 2 image that is consistent with the historicist method and how I understand it. So make sure you get my book. Go to my website, crosstheborder.org, and press on the book cover there, Footsteps of Mystery Babylon, and you can get the book in whatever form you want, either paperback or e-copy. Okay, let's see, what else do we... Let's continue with our H. Grattan Guineas and close that up for this section, and we'll get off into other things. I've got a lot more to talk about in the next hour, so we'll try to close this up from the article on my website there that's there now at the top is the early church fathers were historists. Okay, let's see. It is clear from these quotations, okay, we just read the Augustine quotation. It is clear from these quotations, and I'll put that on the screen and try not to mess it up this time. Okay. It is clear from these quotations that the fathers did not interpret the Babylon of the Apocalypse as meaning either the literal Babylon on the Euphrates or some great city in France or England, but as meaning Rome, and I will add, nor meaning some future kingdom like America. And if you want to know where America fits in the picture, get my book. There's some people that got it partly right, but if you want a better picture, you need to get my book of where America fits into the end time prophecy, because it does fit in, and America is mentioned in the book of Revelation. Absolutely. And I hope you'll agree with me on that after you thoroughly search out what I've written there. Okay, so it wasn't but meaning Rome, and it is still the interpretation of the historic school, even today, and it will be until Christ returns. Though for the last 800 years, and he's writing from the 19th century, 800 years, events have proved Babylon to represent Rome, not in its pagan, but in its papal form. Yes, and pay attention to what's going on with this latest Jesuit pope that's rising up now. The Vatican, in representing the Roman Empire in the final Mystery Babylon form, is becoming very prominent in the world scene, and has been over the last couple hundred years, though hiding in the shadows. Okay, but you can get more information on that. Let's finish this up here. It should be noted that none of the fathers held the futurist gap theory. And this is H. Gratan Guinea's writing this, 150 years ago. It should be noted that none of the church fathers held the futurist gap theory, the theory that the book of Revelation overleaps nearly 18 centuries of history, plunging it once into the distant future. And see, that's the truth. Now, we have demonstrated, when you read Daniel chapter 2, we have demonstrated the historicist method of nothing being overleaped from Daniel to the Messiah in Daniel chapter 2, in chapter 7 and 8, and then you go to chapter 11. Nothing is overleaped. Okay, so that is our precedent for it is demonstrated that the historicist method. Okay, to say that suddenly now we're going to overleap everything from New Testament times, going back to the first century, that we're going to overleap everything in history between that time and now, and that all of the rest of prophecy is only about this future 7-year period. So they want to squish the entire Revelation into this future 7-year period. They want to squish all of the prophecies of Daniel and the Old Testament and all of the Old Testament prophets off into this future 7-year period, and perhaps some short time leading up to it, maybe since the reestablishment in 1948 of Israel as a nation. They want to squish all of that, but they want to overleap everything between now and then, throwing out all of that history, saying, well, God did not write anything about that. But that's not the method of interpretation demonstrated. And so if you want to know how the revelation of John portrays the last 1900 years of history, 2,000 years, 1900 years of history, all you have to do is read, E.B. Elliott's Jorge Apocalypte, or stick around, because I think that Tom Friess is going to take it on next. So you don't want to miss that. It is a very difficult read. I have read it. If anyone's read his Jorge Apocalypte, you'll know how difficult and exhausting a read it is, because it is very thorough. He thoroughly exhausts every contention, every argument that could be put up against the historicist method for the revelation, and he leaves no stone unturned. Like I said, it's a very exhaustive work. So if you can't read it yourself, and most people probably can't, because I found it difficult myself to read, at least follow along with Tom when he comes back. He's on a little vacation right now. We're doing some rebroadcasts for Tom, but when he comes back, I'm hoping, he has threatened to jump into E.B. Elliott's Jorge Apocalypte, so you'll want to stick around for that. We're almost finished with this article, which I do want to finish this session here. So let's go back to that. Okay, so it should be noted that none of the fathers held the futurist gap theory, the theory that the book of Revelation overleaps nearly 18 centuries of Christian history, plunging it at once into the distant future and devoting itself entirely to predicting the events of the last few years of this dispensation. As to the subject of Antichrist, there was a universal agreement among them concerning the general idea of the prophecy. While there were differences as to details, these differences arising chiefly from the notion that the Antichrist would be in some way Jewish as well as Roman. It is true they thought that the Antichrist would be an individual man. Their early position sufficiently accounts for this. They had no conception and could have no conception of the true nature and length of the tremendous apostasy which was to set in upon the Christian church. They were not prophets and could not foresee that the church was to remain 19 centuries in the wilderness. Through prolonged and bitter persecution under a success of nominally Christian but apostate rulers, filling the place of the ancient Caesars and emulating their anti-Christian deeds. Had they known these things, we may well believe their views would have completely harmonized with those of historic interpreters of later times. The fathers went as far as they could go in the direction in which the historical interpreters of these last days have traveled. Further, much that was dark to them in prophecy has become clear to the successors in the light of its accomplishment. That's the historical interpretation of prophecy. Prophecy unfolding in history. As it unfolds in history, it is revealed and we can see it clearly, because hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. Divine providence has thrown light, as it could not fail to do, on divine prediction. Romanism and the Reformation, that's pages 190 through 200, is where I quote that from H. Gratan Guinea's book. Okay. And he also has a little bit to say about futurism, so I thought I'd throw that in there as an addendum to seal up this article on futurism. To resist the use to which Scripture prophecy was put by the Reformers is no light or unimportant matter. The system of prophetic interpretation, known as futurism, does resist this use. It condemns the interpretation of the Reformers. It condemns the views of all these men, and of all the martyrs, and of all the confessors and faithful witnesses of Christ for long centuries. It condemns the Albigenses, the Waldenses, the Wycliffites, the Hussites, the Lollards, the Lutherans, the Calvinists. It condemns them all, and upon a point upon which they were all agreed, an interpretation of Scripture which they embodied in their solemn confessions and sealed with their blood. It condemns the spring of their action, the foundation of the structure they erected. How daring this act, and how destitute of justification. What an opposition to the pillars of a work most manifestly divine. For it is no less than this. For futurism asserts that Luther and all the Reformers were wrong in this fundamental point, and whose interpretation of prophecy does it justify and approve? That of the Romanists. So their futurists are in total agreement with the Antichrist. And that article, like I said, can be found at my website, and it's called crosstheborder.org, Early Church Fathers Were Historicists, by H. Gratan Guineas. So definitely get that. And as we discuss, you're looking at the screen, you can see there's a picture of the cover of my book there. Click on that and get my book, and you can learn a little bit more about America. Well, we got only a few minutes. I'm not going to start anything else, but I will check the chat room to see what we got going here. Let's see. Hippolytus of Rome. Okay, they're just sticking with the discussion here. I don't know where he's reading from. Okay, well, we've got that all cleared up, I hope. Okay, well, nobody's got any questions or anything in the chat room, so we'll put my face back on the screen here. And we're going to go into a break here and have a little music and then some news. And we'll be back in about 8 minutes, so go fill up your coffee cup, grab a snack or whatever that's going to get you through the next hour. And for those of you listening on YouTube or the podcast, make sure you click on that button to find the next hour. Also, go back and get the last 2 shows on the millennium. There's a lot of good information, and I'm going to address a few points that people have questioned me on and called me out on some of those videos and from those shows anyway. So we'll discuss some of the finer points, and some of the other listeners may have the same questions in their mind. I find that a lot of people have the same questions. So make sure you come back. Go to my blog, my website, crosstheborder.org. In the upper right-hand column there, you'll find a place to put your email address in there and subscribe to my blog. Nobody else is going to get your email address. That's all very secure, so you'll be notified. First, you'll get a password to view my protected videos, and you'll be notified every time I put a blog. I put a new posting on the blog, and at the most, that might be twice a week, but usually not more than that. So you're not going to be inundated with 10 blogs a day or whatever. With 10 posts a day and kind of continually on the website. Plus, it also helps for the rating of my website and search engines and stuff. The more people that are posting stuff, use the share buttons there a lot. And if the Holy Spirit taps you on the shoulder and says maybe you ought to support this guy with some of your tithes and offerings, well, you can find out how to do that on my website, or you can contact me on the contact page, and I can help you out with that. Okay, here comes that break. We'll be back.